I'm honored to introduce our distinguished guests today, two prominent Lebanese writers who have written extensively about oppression and violence. They set their novels in historical places and times, and their novels feature primarily female characters in the face of conservative religious traditions set against the backdrop of political tensions and instability of the Lebanese Civil War. Please join me in welcoming Hanan Al Shaykh and Iman Humaydan, who came especially from Paris to join our panel today. Hanan is a short story writer and playwright. She was born into a conservative Shia Muslim family. She received her primary education in Beirut, and later she attended the American College for Girls in Cairo. Her novels are heavily influenced by the patriarchal controls under which she was raised. Al Shaykh's work is a social commentary on the status of women in the Arab Muslim world, in which she challenges notions of sexuality, obedience, modesty, and familial relations. Hanan will be reading from her novel, The Locust and the Bird, My Mother's Story, قصتي شرح يطول, which is a biography of a Muslim woman from Lebanon, her own mother, who dared to make her own choices. Hanan gave voice to her mother and wrote in the first-person perspective. Hanan wrote several novels in Arabic that were translated into English and into 28 other languages. She worked with Unsil Haj and Ghassan Ganafani in Al Nahar newspaper in her early years. Her first novel, Suicide of a Dead Man, was published in 1970. Then Satan's Horse, the story of Zahra, Women of Sand and Myrrh, where she spoke openly about lesbianism. Edward Said reviewed that novel. Her last published novel in English was a fascinating modernized version of the famous 1001 Nights. It was made into a play and shown in Toronto Festival. And now she has a brand new novel which will be released soon. Hanan is rebellious, passionate about life and literature. She is a writer of life as it is. Our second guest is Lebanese writer, researcher, and lecturer Iman Humaydan. She is the author of 4 books, Be as in Beirut, Wild Mulberries, Other Lives, and The Weight of Paradise. 3 of her books are a trilogy about women in the civil war in Lebanon. Humaydan writes in Arabic against mainstream ideas, including religious ideas. Her books are translated into English and other international languages. She recently edited an anthology of young Lebanese writers, Beirut Noir. Iman holds a BA in sociology, MA in anthropology. In her work, both literary and academic, she is concerned with memories of war and the lives of women, their losses, struggles, and challenges against gendered roles. She is co-founder of PEN Lebanon and a board member of PEN International. Through the female protagonist in her novel, The Weight of Paradise, its Arabic title is 50 غرام من الجنة. Her novel alternates between the war-ridden Beirut of the late 97 and Beirut 20 years later beset by reconstruction crews. It is a poignant evocation of the fight to defend and restore memory through the cycles of violence, exile, and suffering which seek to annihilate it. It feels like a rejection of forgetting. And I will pass the mic to Hanan to start.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. And can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. My mother forced me to listen to her. She wanted her life story. She wanted me to hear it, and I didn't want to, but she forced me, and I listened to her, and I wrote it. In the kitchen attic of my mother's flat in Beirut, there was a little mouse. My mother used to throw pieces of bread to it until someone warned her that this tiny mouse would grow into a huge rat. My mother trapped the mouse, killed it, and sighed in relief. She had no kindness left for rats. Wasn't it enough that one rat had interfered in her fate when she was 11 years old, precipitated her engagement, and forced her to be married at age 14? This is how it happened. A rabid rat hiding in a pile of food next to the boiler bit my mother's much older sister, Manifa, who came down with a sudden fever and died, leaving 3 small boys, the youngest a baby. That was in Beirut in 1934. 2 years earlier, my grandmother had brought the little girl who would become my mother to live in the city where my grandmother's 4 adult children lived and worked. Those half-brothers and sisters of my mother's were from my grandmother's first marriage, which had come to an abrupt end when her husband was killed in a robbery. My grandmother married again, but her second husband, my grandfather, left her, reduced to eating charred and discarded grain in the wheat fields of South Lebanon. My grandmother and mother joined 19 other family members living in one large Beirut apartment. When the rat killed Manifa, the family decreed that my mother should marry her widowed brother-in-law as soon as she got her first period. She could then become a mother to her 3, so she could then become a mother to her 3 bereaved nephews. My mother's brother-in-law and soon-to-be husband was 18 years her senior. She was a tiny fish caught in a net. Her marriage not only plucked her from the glamour of Beirut, it also tore her from her first love. She had met Muhammad when she was 13 and he was 18. Sewing classes with a seamstress, his cousin. He heard her singing and fell in love. Their love was innocent and platonic. When he discovered she couldn't read or write, he read her poems and prose. She in turn thought up her an old poem and recited them to him. Muhammad's love was not only romantic, it was also caring. He thought she would prefer to carry a handbag rather than a drawstring money pouch around her neck. With the utmost delicacy, he suggested she should buy a bra. He gave her a toothbrush. My mother tried everything she could not to marry. "I am too young," she yelled. A beautiful, spirited girl, she begged relatives to come to the rescue. Then she set her brother-in-law a series of conditions for marriage. Never believing he would agree, she asked for roast chicken, from a restaurant, then a trip to the cinema to see Laurel and Hardy. Appalled at her naivety, her sewing teacher advised a gold watch and bracelets instead. When these were also forthcoming, my mother ran back to her village in the south, to her absent father. But her fate was sealed. Her father had already agreed to the marriage. He beat her and took her back to Beirut, to the hand that forced her into a traditional white wedding dress. Howling, my mother ran to the stove and blackened her face with soot, a symbol of mourning. 2 nights in a row, on the 3rd night, she was pushed into her brother-in-law's room. Shall I continue?
Yes, please, just a little bit more.
Now married, my 14-year-old mother continued playing with children her own age. They played hide and seek on Beirut rooftops, and she became a movie addict, dreaming of escape. My mother's husband was a pious workaholic living to work and pray. She didn't dare think about Muhammad, who sent her a bitter message when he heard about the marriage, blaming himself for trusting such a young girl. But at the age of 15, when my mother gave birth to my oldest sister, it was Muhammad who sent flowers. My mother began meeting Muhammad in daylight, hiding in his bedroom at his family home. She would spend hours there, waiting for him to come back from work at lunchtime, forced to pee into a bottle when they made love for the first time. My mother wept because she had let someone other than Muhammad lie on top of her and rob her of her virginity. And Muhammad wept because he was a decent man in love with a married woman. She then went home and seduced my father, believing that the baby would be half Muhammad's and half my father's. When she told Muhammad she was pregnant, he accused her of betrayal. She indignant, explaining the half-baby plan, and he explained that he had been careful not to get her pregnant. My mother had believed that each time they had sex, it made a baby, and didn't understand. Muhammad was the first person to explain the facts of life to my mother, who was now expecting me. After my birth, the situation became more complicated still. Muhammad's brother spilled the beans. My mother denied everything, but her suspicious, gloomy, older half-brother took to watching her like a hawk and decreed that she wasn't to go out unless chaperoned by his wife. In spite of the scandal and threats, my mother was determined to stay in the relationship with Muhammad.
Thank you so much. Okay, shall we pass to Iman?
Yeah, do you think we need the microphone?
I think they're switched
Turn it
off.
off just
Yeah,
so
because
I think we can, yeah, exactly.
yeah, we apologize.
So, how can I put it off?
It's off
already
already.
off.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's all right, yeah.
Great. So, hello everyone. Well, I'm going to read from The Weight of Paradise, my last novel. Just I wanted to introduce it to come to the chapter I'm going to read. It's the journal of Noura. Noura is a Syrian woman who was a journalist and who was killed in Lebanon in 1978. It's a fiction, it's not reality. And someone found her diaries. So I'm going to read some of these. Noura's diaries. I have dreamed of being a writer since I was a young girl, and I see newspaper articles as the pinnacle of writing. The word I was searching for was always on the tip of my tongue, near my heart, but it didn't find itself on paper. It wasn't able to become a material reality in a body with a voice, a rhyme, a rhythm, or an impact. I used to believe that I was afflicted by something, an illness, or a lack of power. This affliction put me in an inferior position to other people my age. I remember those other girls in my class. Their laughter used to ring out behind classroom walls and in the playground. I used to walk and laugh with them. When we went down the stairs into the big playground, but just as quickly I would get bored and revert into my faraway solitude. I used to be anxious that I was like this. Then I started to hear stories of their marriages, the children they had, and how they stayed at home. Time passed before I knew what was up with me, that it was something good that I should look after, a distinction, not an illness. In Syria, after I decided to come and live in Lebanon, I burned all the thick notebooks I had filled. At the time, I didn't understand the real reason. I had thrown everything I wrote into the fireplace and then stood near it, looking at the fire, consuming the pages and my heart at the same time. Why did I burn everything I had written? Was I punishing myself for my sister's death, or did I want to exorcise my guilt? Or perhaps I burned what I had written to begin a new life in Beirut, so as not to die in my grandfather's house. My sister Hanan didn't run away. Instead, she left a letter telling the story of her death. The first thing I did when I arrived in Beirut was to write down my sister's Hanan story. At the time, I didn't know that the pages would also determine my entire life. I wrote the story down, and while writing, many things came out into the open. My sister's story changed me. Not only did my sister die, but indeed, the old Noura died too. Now, I think that burning everything I had written was a little suicide, but it was also protecting me, so I couldn't write down my final death. Writing about death was a way to survive. I could understand at the time why my father remained silent, why my cousin Huda ignored what I told her, and why my half-brother decided to remain neutral. The end of my sister Hanan's story was the beginning of mine. However, writing down my sister's story didn't cure me of the desire to settle accounts, which was both my right and that of my sister, who lost her life. My sister wasn't the only one who drank poisonous pesticides and went to sleep on the floor of the Baki, where they didn't find her until early evening. No, she wasn't the only one of the women in the family who committed suicide or tried to kill herself. 20 years before my sister's incident of my father's sisters tried in the same way, in a different place. She beat death in the final moments, however. Many stories about the women in the family, both close and distant relatives, contain the experience of suicide attempts, but most of those women survived. Women retaliate against oppression by oppressing themselves. They are locked in this cycle. If a woman could have understood why she was considering killing herself, she might have been able to stop. Many women refuse to oppress themselves without being able to specify the source of oppression. Despite this, they search for some light of day. They distance themselves, migrate, survive. Is it differences in personality, or is it different levels of the survival instinct that play a role in women protecting themselves? Hanan's suicide compelled me to put all of these questions on paper. Every time I wanted to write about her death, I didn't find an answer, but I found myself propelled by an inner strength to break these vicious cycles. I inherited this strength from my mother's mother, who taught me that life is my right. She managed to stay alive by pure chance when she hadn't even yet turned 6 years old. A young man from northern Syria took her from an Armenian refugee camp near Aleppo after witnessing the murder of her family. He was a soldier in the Ottoman army and was discharged after taking a bullet wound in his arm, which paralyzed his hand. He brought her to his family and told them, "She will be your little sister." Shahani was her name, before the family that adopted her changed both her name and her religion. The family wanted to preserve her name somehow, so she wouldn't forget it. So they found her a strange name. She became Shahla instead of Shahani. Sometimes my grandmother remembered her original name, conjured up her language, and started humming Armenian songs that she had carried with her since she was a little girl. Songs so mixed through time with the typical Aleppo rhythms of Qudud Halabiya that she no longer knew how to distinguish between them. I used to listen to her, not understanding anything, and most likely, even if she no longer understood the meanings of the words she was singing. She had forgotten her language, but she hadn't forgotten Mardin, the village from which she had been displaced with her family as a child. Perhaps she had forgotten everything except one day when she was 17 years old and she met my grandfather. This meeting changed her life a second time. He was a young man selling sacks of wheat with his father in Aleppo when he encountered her in her father's shop. She smiled coquettishly when she saw my grandfather, saying, "We won't buy your wheat. We only eat Jazeera wheat." She meant the province of Al Jazeera, famous for its wheat cultivation. She liked him and wanted to flirt with him, but didn't know how. She was about to leave and travel to teach in a school in the Huran Mountains. So she traveled with the two of them to become a school teacher in a girls' school belonging to Anglican missionaries. She then became the wife of this young man who was to become my grandfather. She started tending to the orchard near the house, trying to grow pistachios there, and it was under the shadows of those trees that she used to sit on cold Aleppo evenings. She never succeeded in growing them in the mountains. She cultivated more and more vineyards and then started making red wine, which she kept in vats from one year to another. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Hanan and Iman, for this lovely reading. And I open the floor for questions from the audience. Yes.
Hi. I don't know a great deal about Arab literature. I just wanted to ask, what tradition is there in Arab literature of women writers? In English, you have people, in the 18th century like Jane Austen. I mean, how far do female writers go back in the Arab literature tradition?
Well, it depends. Shall I answer it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can answer.
Well, it depends. Women poets used to recite poetry and used to write poetry in their mind, even 1,000 years ago. They were very, they used to express themselves by reciting poems. Yeah. So there is no rules. Yeah, and many women wrote as well novels, but they weren't published. They used to depend on storytelling. A mother or a grandmother will tell her children and grandchildren stories, and like 1001 Night. How do you think 1001 Night was formed? Yeah, it was gathered from here and there and everywhere, and because people didn't travel, only they used to hear stories from other people, like seamen, or they would talk about that they saw something in that country or the other country, and women will hear these stories and then change them, and yeah, this is how. What do you think?
Maybe I can add something concerning the novel itself. That it started in the women novel started at the beginning of the 20th century with Zainab Fawaz, but well, we call it a novel right now, but if we go back to the content, it was still within the domestic world, like talking about children, about cooking, about everything in the interior. And it took really years for the novel to contain a theme related to the public space. And I think it didn't start before the end of the Second World War in the Arabic world, like with Az-Zayyat,
Latifa Zayyat.
Yeah, with
yeah,
also Layla Ba'al-Baki.
Layla Ba'al-Baki in the
60s. In the 50s. In the 60s.
Mid-50s, Layla Ba'al-Baki. Yeah. But Zainab Fawaz, I think...
was 1906.
Yeah. And who else?
Aisha Taymuriya.
Aisha Taymuriya. Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, you're right, Amir. Yeah, you're right.
But
yeah.
I mean, the let's say rebellious voice.
Novel, yeah.
Rebellious voice of a woman.
Yeah.
I don't think that we read it before the end of the Second World War.
Yeah.
And so it seems that it's going therefore, and so it coincides with the rise of nationhood.
Exactly.
At the same time.
Yeah.
It's also these novels also challenging.
Yes.
The national narratives of these nations.
Yeah. With the independence.
Yes.
The countries.
Yeah.
And women started having a voice, not only to call for independence on the national level, but individual level from fathers and the patriarchal society.
Especially Layla Ba'al-Baki.
But also the open door.
Open door, Latifa Zayyat.
Open door.
Yeah, but Layla before her, I think. Yeah.
And between brackets, I want to say something now, because you asked this question, and I find it an opportunity to say it because I never said it.
Say it.
That not only Layla Ba'al-Baki influenced my writings, also Hanan, in her early writings before I met her. Actually, I met Hanan for the first time. It was in 2016.
Wallah.
Yes. But I met her writings earlier, much earlier, and when I started writing to publish, Hanan was always there. Like she.
Is it with Hikayat Zahra, or before?
Well,
I think. Story of Zahra. Really?
Yes.
Oh my God.
And Hikayat Zahra, of course, because it was the war, and we were living the war.
Yeah.
And what really also influenced me. Misk al-Ghazal. It was a revolution in the Arabic novel. So it's important to talk about a woman writer talking about another woman writer, because our voices should be really heard.
True. Yeah.
Because if you look at the Arabic literature, it's very rare to find Arabic novels written by women that are heard.
Yes.
That they marked something.
And as if we needed to read.
Yes.
To read those women. I remember I used to go downtown taking food, the lunch for my father, who was a merchant. And I can't believe that how they used to send me. They weren't scared. I was like 13, 14. They weren't scared that something will happen or anything.
No.
And this is when I read Layla Ba'al-Baki.
That's in Beirut?
In Beirut,
In Beirut.
yeah. I used to go downtown, and I will, I will always be late for my father's lunch, wandering around in all the market. And then there was a, near the Capitol, there was a Antoine library, but Arabic as well.
Yeah.
And this is when I read Ana Ahya, I Live by Layla Ba'al-Baki. But of course, I didn't have money to buy the book. I would go, and then I'd read like 1 page, 2 pages every single day. And then the man said, I know what you're doing, girl.
You're reading the whole book.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. That was really beautiful, and so they echoed each other. Huh?
Yes.
I don't know if you decided beforehand.
No, not at all.
Improvising.
I love the image of the mouse at the beginning with the trap and your mother, but your mother being the one who first feeds him and then kills him. And I wondered, Hanan, whether why your mother wanted you to hear her story. Was there particular, was there something in particular?
Yes.
And Iman, your character starts by saying, I wanted to tell the story of my sister, and then shifts to the grandmother, who seems to have a kind of a happier, or a sort of also a life of struggle, but one that has, where one can maybe, a story which one can maybe inhabit and also can nurture your character rather than, I mean, it seems like she wants to tell the sister story as a gesture of denunciation, but then she goes and tells the other story.
Ahead,
Well, I chose the journal, actually. I chose from the middle of the novel, because the story tells about a Lebanese woman called Maya. She went to the downtown when it was still destroyed after the civil war in Lebanon to to make a film. And there she discovered this journal. And I wanted to read it because I'm though I wrote it, when I come to this journal, every time I read it, I feel that the stories of the war atrocities, they haven't been written enough by women, and they haven't been approached in women's language and women's voice. And Noura was writing about what happened to her, what happened first to her sister, who died, who actually she killed herself, her sister, because she had a relationship with a officer in the secret services in the Syrian army. And this officer, when he knew that she is pregnant, he just let her, abandoned her. And she's living in a conservative society, and everything was closed. I mean, she didn't have any horizon or any way out, so she killed herself.
Yeah.
And Noura, instead of staying, she left. She went to Lebanon, and during that time, Lebanon was still, because I don't think it's still anymore, Lebanon was still a refugee for political refugees or for humanitarian refugees. And she went there to work as a journalist, Noura, and there she wrote the story of her sister, and she published it.
Interesting.
And it's important to talk about her grandmother, because her grandmother had a motto that she always repeated it, that life deserves to be lived, and it's a right. Life is a right. And Noura was discussing this and asking, why her sister didn't hear this. I mean, if she really heard this, she wouldn't have killed herself. Maybe she would have chosen another way out for her.
She was desperate then.
She was desperate, and that's why Noura is questioning: is hope something in our genes, or it's something we worked
On it
to create
basically.
it?
Yeah.
Why people kill themselves and other people not?
Not.
So it's a question that's related to places like our country, where not only our country, our Arab world,
Yeah.
where people sometimes find themselves in a situation that they feel everything is closed. They cannot find a way out. But in reality,
Yeah.
always there is a way out.
Yeah.
Yeah. True.
Well,
Hanan, yes.
yeah. My mother left home when I was 6 years old, and she married her lover. Yeah, my mother, that's why, I mean, she was so strong-willed woman, and she really fought. I mean, and I didn't know that. Every time, I was a journalist in Lebanon, and I had written about 21 Lebanese women who did something. The first doctor, the first lawyer, the first politician, and I would go and talk to them, and then about their lives and how they started their career, and they used to be published in the An-Nahar literary supplement in Lebanon. And of course, they used to advertise what's happening in the supplement on television. They would say, for example, read so and so tomorrow in An-Nahar talking about so and so. So they would say, read Hanan Al Shaykh talking about Kamil al-Assad, for example. And my mother would listen, and she would be so upset. She would call me the next day. She said, daughter, you have to talk to me. You have to talk to me. I wasn't sent to school. I'm illiterate. I was forced to marry your father. They waited for me to have my first period. So at 11, when I was 11, they read the Shahada al-Fatiha, so I will marry your father, to look after the 3 boys of my sister who died. I had no chance whatsoever. You have to talk to me. I have stories more important than these educated women.
That's nice.
Educated women, just listen to me. And I was telling her, okay, tayyib, mama. And I never did. I never did. And, but I used to take things from her. For example, when she left my father and married her lover, we weren't allowed to see her for a few months. And then an aunt took us to see my mother. And when I went, I was preparing myself. How am I going to react? How am I going to what am I going to see? Shall I kiss her, or shall I hug her, or shall I not? I was really very nervous. And then as soon as I came into her small house, what do I see? The Persian carpet, which was lost. It was on our roof. My father used to put all the Persian carpets in summer, so they would take the sun, and yeah. But one of these carpets was lost, and there was a blind man, Elia, who used to cane all chairs. And I would sit and look at him because he was blind, and yet he knew how to cane most of the chairs. And my father blamed him and accused him. He said, you are the one who stole the carpet. And I remember Elia nearly was crying, and I wanted to see if blind people can produce tears, and I kept looking at him. He didn't produce tears, but he took my hand, so I will, for the first time, so I would take him down the stairs. And when I saw this carpet there, I really hated my mother. I couldn't believe it. I hugged her, of course, but I said, no. First of all, my mother left home. She left us, and I was 6 years old. She left me, and now she stole even the carpet. So later, I wrote about Daniel Johnson Davis, who was an Arabist. He was translating. He said, I want to translate. Do you have any short stories? When he read the story of Zahra, I said, yes, I'll write it. And I wrote this, the Persian carpet. And it was published. And so my mother said, okay, you are writing, you've written about the Persian carpet. What about me? What about me? And I say, okay. So 1999, something like that. I was living in London. I went to Lebanon, and she said, daughter, that's it. You have to listen to me. I said, I love you. It's all right that you left. She said, no, stop it. Don't do this. I want you to listen to my story. I want someone to write my story. I said, I forgive you, mother. It's fine, you left us. She said, no, I want every family to read my story, and then they wouldn't do like what they've done to me. My family was very cruel, women and men. So I said, okay. And then she stood up. My mother is illiterate. She stood up, literally, and she started like reciting. حكايتي شرح يطول لو ما جرادة ما علق عصفور. My life is a long story. If it wasn't for a locust, a bird wouldn't have been caught. And I was really mesmerized. I said, how do you learn this? Where did you hear it? She said, let's start.
Wow.
And this is how we started. And then I was due to go back to return back to London. I didn't. I stayed with her like 1 month, 2 months. And I went back to London. And then she called me and she said, daughter, I've changed my mind because now I have a maid. And I was telling you that we didn't have food. We used to go after all the villagers to look into the sand and into the soil for grains. And I don't want people to know that your mother was like that she was poor. And I said, I don't mind, mother. She said, no, for me, now I have someone to help me at home, and you send sometimes your car to pick me up, the taxi. I said, okay. A friend of mine, Carmen Khalil, when I told her, a writer, she said, Hanan, no, write 1 chapter. Write the first chapter and read it to your mother, and then you will take it from there. I did write the first chapter, and I read it to my mother on the telephone. She said, go, who cares? Yes, we used to be very hungry, and this is what your father did to your uncle did to me, even my mother did to me. They all gang against me, and they married me off when I was 14 years old to a man who was 18 years older than me, and it's fine. Go ahead and write. And my God, when I heard her story, I couldn't believe it. Yeah. I thought she was the writer, not me.
Amazing.
Because she remembered everything, dialogues, how the weather, what this person told her, and she fought. She was a fighter. She was a fighter. When Muhammad, her husband, died, they appointed his brother to be the guardian of the children and her, and she fought him. She will go every day to the court and say, no, I want to be responsible for my children. I don't want someone who is stalking me day and night, and I think he likes me. I don't want. And the judge will tell her, no, you are a widow. You have 5 children that are no. She said, okay. So she asked her beautiful sister-in-law. She had beautiful green eyes. She said, I will kill you if you don't try to all your seduction to the sheikh in the court, to the judge. And she took her, and my mother sat and she started crying while her sister-in-law was doing this and that. And the judge, she was, and okay.
And he
said,
gave the okay.
He gave the okay. And
it worked.
He gave the okay, but she came back and she told all the neighbors. She even stood at the balcony and she said, hey, I won over the sheikh. I won over the
Wow. What a powerful woman.
She was very powerful in her own way. But she lied. She betrayed. She did so many things. But she wanted to do what she thought she had to do.
Because the society is very harsh.
Very
on
harsh
women.
on her, especially
Women. Until now, women don't have the right for the guardian of their children.
Absolutely.
If the husband dies,
Yeah.
Even it's my own story.
Yes.
I had to leave.
Please tell us.
Like I had to leave Lebanon and Syria because my husband died and the family wanted to take my children from me. We are in the 21st century.
Yeah.
And although my son was born in America and he holds the Canadian passport, but still, if I'm living in the Middle East, we have to go under these laws that the mother has no right, not even to her own children.
Absolutely.
Because we are not, considered as human. And I had to flee the country, and that's why I came to England. And since then, I'm living here. My son is now, he's not a minor anymore, but that was the main reason I had to leave my country also. Yeah, and we were so scared every time someone knocks on the door that this is the policeman
coming.
Oh my
God, really?
Because that's how they do it,
Yes, they do it.
They come with the police
and
and they take the child from the mother, and then the mother goes to court, for years and years to get back her child. Yeah, so it resonates really with me also. Yeah.
No, but you were very strong.
Yeah.
Yes. And my mother was very strong.
Acts of survival.
Survival.
This is what we're talking about in the exhibition.
Yes.
After all,
Absolutely.
it's the acts of survival, of Syrian women. And it's through the lens of these two women we're talking about all the women in general.
Yeah.
And it's an act of survival. And if I want to go back to my novel, when I saw your exposition, I said, no matter to which class a woman belongs.
Amazing.
I mean, there is something called the woman cause,
Yeah.
even if she belongs to the higher society or the working society. Some people don't really acknowledge that there is something called the woman's case, to which society she belongs. Like my three heroines, one is a housemaid, one is a journalist, one is a filmmaker, but they met. That the three of them are facing oppression, each woman in her way, and they stood up to oppression, each woman in her way. Sabah, maybe in the novel, it reminds me of your mom. But maybe Sabah didn't have the chance to stay with her lover. I mean, her lover left her because her family threatened him.
Yes. Yeah.
So to save to save his skin, he left.
Yeah.
And she had to marry her cousin, whom she didn't love, just because she, in the Kurdish society, when a woman runs away with her lover and then she comes back to her family, nobody marries her.
Yeah.
She becomes like a second-hand person. So she had to marry her cousin, who is a handicap and who is mentally retarded.
I remember, I mean,
so she deserved it at the end.
The freedom of choice. They didn't have the freedom of choice.
Never,
but they were fighting for it. Like you fought for it and you got it. My mother fought for it.
I mean,
left and right.
We pay a price. We pay.
The issue is not that they won.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't.
But
the issue that
they fight. They fought and they are still
That's
fighting.
The important thing.
Yes.
Yeah. When you rebel and you refuse, to accept those rules against you. So.
But when I heard my mother what she had to tell me, I thought, oh my God. I think she gave me my personality.
Your strength.
Because of her, I am Hanan who wanted to write at the age of 14. I would write against my brother who would say, no, you're not going to sit in a coffee shop. I would write and then I'll take what I write to An-Nahar newspaper. And I stand not believing to leave it and go until one Unsil Hajj or someone will come to give it immediately, and I say, I've written this. So they will publish it. So
amazing.
my mother, I think my mother would be really the writer if she learned how to write and read. Can you imagine? They didn't. Her father was a teacher.
Oh, he didn't
in the
send her to
south.
school.
No, he didn't teach her. It's all right, you don't want to send her to school. Teach her how to read and write.
Did he teach his sons?
Yeah.
The son, yes. Yeah. But I liked when you said in the book that when you were growing up, you always listened to the voice in your head.
Yes.
That there was a voice that tells you what to do. Because you were young, with no guidance, with no one to talk to.
No, you're right.
Your father was very far away.
Very far away, very religious. And in our neighborhood, I was really different than all the girls. And because of, they used to say, they wouldn't say Hanan or Tima, my sister. They say, these two girls whose mother left them.
Yeah, stigmatized. Yeah.
The whole time. Yeah. So in a way, I created someone in my mind, the voice, who would be with me and tell me what to do.
Yeah.
The voice, and I will listen to it and sometimes shout at it, saying, "Leave me alone. I want to do what I want."
Yeah. And you turned out to be this amazing, humorous, very brave.
Yeah,
also
I think because
women,
of my mother, believe
not
me.
only writer, as your own.
Thank you.
Carried your own life, and So, Iman, you said to me that you want to write about a love story with no wounds. Mm-hmm. Do you think love exists without losses?
I want to think like that way. Why not? Why not? I mean, we are living in a place region where our life is mixed with wounds, with
Everything. Yeah.
regrets, with losses, with hopelessness. But why not? I dream always that one day I will be able to write a love story without political stories in it.
Yeah.
I love to write a novel that
Love
makes
story.
me laugh, even myself, when
Yes.
I read it.
Yeah.
I can't. I
But-
can't.
yeah.
It's.
But
I
be
can't.
careful.
I mean,
Playful, yeah.
No, but be careful because they'll say, "Oh,
I can't.
but
I
you
mean,
are."
I will not do
but
it
you are
because
very serious writer.
I dream to do
How
it.
can
like,
you?
like when I read novels that make me laugh when I'm sitting in my bed, and
Yeah.
I say, "Oh my God, I will never ever be able to write a funny story
Yeah.
because our life is not
Maybe.
like that."
No, you're right.
No, Hanan,
But even-
Hanan
but-
has like this cynical.
Yeah, like my latest novel, many people said, "Oh my God, what happened to you?" The writer of Story of Zahra and Woman of Sand, and
Yes.
Misk al-Ghazal,
Yeah. It's totally different.
writes Azara London
Azara.
Stand.
Yes.
You have to tell them
Yeah,
a little bit
yeah,
about
yeah.
this novel.
Yeah.
It's like really
No,
interesting.
you say it.
No,
you tell
you
them.
you tell it.
It's
better.
important. It's
it's-
important.
yeah.
This
Yeah.
exactly what you are bringing up
It's
now.
about
Like
virginity.
how this change has happened. I mean,
Because
someone who wrote Hikayat Zahra
Zahra.
and then Adara.
Azara
Is
London
it
Stand.
living in the West? Is it
Yes,
is
in
it
a way.
this connection? with
No, living. You're right, in the West, and I wanted to make fun of virginity
Yeah.
because it is khalas.
The
Khalas.
title
Now
is
in the-
occasionally
The
version.
occasional
The
virgin.
occasional version.
Yeah, and in Arabic, Azara London Stand, the virgins of London Stand, because there's some Islamists called London Stand.
Yeah, like
Afghanistan,
Arabistan.
Arabistan.
Yeah.
Afghanistan.
So-
Like
Yeah,
So
so
this-
it is, I wanted
This
to...
woman meets the guy in
the guy
Hyde Park.
at Hyde Park, the
Yeah.
speaker's corner, and he can't believe that she wanted to teach him a lesson because he really was against her.
He was a sheikh also, like
No,
religious.
he was
fundamentalist.
fundamentalist,
fundamentalist.
but not a sheikh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a
She
sheikh.
said, "Okay, I want to teach him a lesson," because while she was talking, he was really against her, everything, and he was brushing her aside, like, "Who are you? Look at you. You're not veiled." Ta 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 ta. So she said, she decided, "Okay, I'm going to show you," and then she tricked him, and she made him fall in love with her, and then she got her revenge.
Yes.
Her own way.
Yeah.
Her own way.
It's very interesting. I recommend it. Yeah.
Good. Amir, do you want to say anything
Yes,
to
my
Iman?
question was for Iman. We've talked a lot about the various circumstances from within which one begins to write, and you spoke about the war in your case. But how would you see your own upbringing as influential in making you a writer?
Yeah, well, I was brought up in a very diversified village with respect to sex and also with respect to languages. We had schools, French and English. And with respect to the geography itself, our village, it's on a hill and there are terraces and you can see the sea. So, and I come from a family where luggages, suitcases we had more than our number. We are 14, by the way, in the family. And we had like around 25 luggages at home. And always people traveling and coming and traveling and coming. And I grew up seeing the beds well done where we sleep. We used to sleep in a room, maybe half of this hall, like 6 beds in a room, and other rooms, another 6 beds. And always we had guests coming to visit my father from other places, from other countries. So I grew up in a very open society. and especially that my father belonged to the Syrian National Party. It was founded, yes, it was founded by someone who lived in Argentina and came to Lebanon.
My God.
And he had this big dreams of uniting the Arab world and including also Cyprus and
PPS.
yeah.
PPS, yeah.
So, and they were secular. So I didn't know to which sect I belonged, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I was like
They were
16
against
when I
religion.
started understanding what a Druze mean.
Yeah.
Up till now, I don't understand actually. And when the war started, I was like 18, and the first thing that happened, and I wrote about it in my first novel, that my friend was killed. He was Christian, and it took me like years to digest why he was killed and
You mean
and not me.
the war of the mountain?
Yes,
The
the
war-
civil war.
the civil war in
It
Lebanon.
started in
70.
1975. He
Yeah.
was killed in 1976.
Was he
And-
fighting?
No,
or
no, 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 no.
he wasn't.
Just because he was Christian.
Yeah,
Oh
you
my
would be
God.
killed
Nothing
on
else.
your
Because they saw in his car
ID.
Oh, yeah,
magazine
yeah,
of a
Yeah.
phalangist
yeah. Yeah,
party.
yeah, yeah.
So it took me years to grasp this idea that an identity might kill and might not kill. And I wrote this in my first novel, and then of course I was so happy to read Amin Ma'louf writing about the same topic, that identities kill. I wrote it in 1996, that identities kill.
You said,
That's
oh.
why they killed my friend, Eli. His name was Eli. So I think the war urged me
Yes.
to write things that are related to the political situation, while before I was writing only poetry,
Amazing,
love,
yeah. Yeah.
But it's the war that puts
Yes.
me
Yeah.
in a coercive movement into the public space, and to feel that no way out. We are there and we have to deal with it.
Yes.
And that's how I wrote my first novel.
Two other brief
And
questions.
Iman, Iman, many Lebanese women, more than men, wrote about the war because they didn't have anything to do with it.
Well, I don't want to. Well,
No,
I don't say
okay.
wrote about the war. For example,
In a way,
yes, Khoury
inspired.
wrote about the
Yeah,
war.
but yes, who else?
Rashid
Rashid al-Da'if. But two or three, we started.
Yes,
we
but
started.
yes, I agree with you
Yes.
100%. But women wrote about. Their writing was a manifesto against war.
Of course.
Yes.
Like for example,
even men.
like my first novel, Suicide of a Dead Man.
Yes.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was about a girl, the praying mantis, about
Yes.
girls also living in a very pious, religious home, and how she is going to become free.
I remember.
And
this.
then, they were very personal in a way. Yeah. But story of Zahra, because I wanted to say something about the war, against the war.
Yeah, it was,
Yes.
Yeah.
It was one of the first novels, actually.
Yes.
It was in 1983, right?
80.
80.
Yeah.
It was before Hajar al-Dahak for
Eh,
Huda Barakat.
yes. 1980.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
I
I
think it
wrote
was
it-
the first novel written by a woman writer in Lebanon
About the
about
war.
the civil war. Yes,
Yeah,
that's-
about the
yeah.
civil war,
Yeah.
because we wanted to take part, but against the fighting.
It's yeah.
Yeah, to express
Yeah.
our feelings, our feeling against the war. That why are you having this war?
Yeah.
And this war, which made us all, not all, many of us leave and run away. And I left 1975, 9th of October 1975. I'm so happy that I left, because I was really scared, because I saw in our neighborhood Christians and Muslims and there were Christians who were dragged only because they were Christians.
Yeah.
And
I did.
anyway, I
And
started.
snipers, you said
Yeah.
you were
Yeah, the
afraid of the
sniper.
sniper.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it
It's
was
a
too
terrible
much.
memory.
But it's good
but
that I mean, you digested this experience in a way
Yes.
that you can write something like.
Because I
Raghad
asked my,
understand.
you're right.
Yeah.
Because I asked myself in London when I came after 2 months, I said, why did I leave?
Mm.
Because of that. So why am I
Trapped.
silent?
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
am I not writing about it,
Yeah.
expressing?
Mm.
I want to write about it, what happened. Because in a way I was a witness, like
Yeah.
you, like
Yeah.
many.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the big question is, like, sorry, we interrupted you. You had 2 little questions.
One is, it's a very simple one, but from what you're saying, your impulse to write fiction and non-fiction, because I know you've written non-fiction as well, came from an external spur to be political, but the internal spur was more personal. So you're a precursor of many women that you were talking to me about earlier, who come from backgrounds that are liberal, educated and so on, and don't write as a cry against personal oppression.
Mm.
That leads to the question I'm going to ask you about wild mulberries. What made you look back?
Yeah.
Several generations
Yeah.
do such
Yeah.
a beautiful work
Yeah.
Yes.
that feels as if it's written at the time it's about.
It's
And
very.
I know
yeah.
from personal conversations with you that it's very different from your own life in many
Yeah.
aspects.
It's very important, your
historical
question, because, well, when I wrote Be as in Beirut, really it was a very moving exorcism. That if I didn't write Be as in Beirut, I don't know, maybe I would have committed suicide, I don't know. But it was something that if I don't write, something will happen to me. So it was like to save myself. It wasn't to publish it. I didn't think even to publish it. And when I finished and I started reading what I wrote, I was so scared. One of the chapters, I had to take it out. I wasn't ready to put myself in facing what happened to me during the war. So I took one chapter that talks about my crossing from Western Beirut to Eastern Beirut and what happened with me with the militiamen. Thanks God they didn't rape me. It happened that one of them knew me, but I was lucky. So this book, I finished this book, and my question was, why in our cities, why in our countries, there is that much hate and destruction? Why, even in the novel, I said, why not in London? Why not in Paris?
Because of religion.
I don't know. We don't have answers when we write. We have rather questions when we write.
More than right.
And I don't think I have answers. So I thought I should go back to the beginning of the century and see, did we have seeds of violence in the Lebanese mountain? How come that a Druze man who drinks coffee every morning with a Christian neighbor kills him? I mean, up till now, I cannot understand how hatred is shaped, how it's born like this. So that's why I went to the beginning of the 20th century to write about wild mulberries. And I was lucky to have a father who used to plant mulberries and who used to raise silkworms with his father. So this novel was about patriarchal violence that was exerted on my father and on the women of my family, my grand
Previous
aunties
generations,
and grandmothers.
Yeah.
They were deprived even of getting married. They kept them at home to work in the land. They didn't even accept that they get married unless they marry someone who works in the land. And that's how the Wild Mulberries came out.
Of course, interestingly, your narrator also has a mother who runs away.
Yes. The mother ran away, yes.
So this is a rebellion.
Yeah.
It's multiple voices.
It's
I
better
guess.
than committing suicide. They run away.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I ask about how your works have been received from the Middle East region. When you call out these taboos and stigmas and, you know, secrets and what happens, you know, in our societies. I know that you're writing as fiction writers, right?
Yeah.
It's not autobiography as such. Has there been any sort of backlash or negative reaction towards your works for both of you?
Yeah. Do you want to start?
You
Yeah. Well, they ban books in the Arab world. Censorship. They ban. But many young people really read us, I think. I always find out that they are very excited to read us. The more they think that there is a question mark about you, around you, they become more excited. But to read you and to follow you and to see what you're doing. But unfortunately, there are lots of banning books. I don't know nowadays if it's still the same. But yeah.
And you've written in English or Arabic?
I always write in Arabic. Always write in Arabic. That's why, and this is very funny, because in Saudi Arabia, especially in Saudi Arabia, because of my novel, Misk al-Ghazal, Women of Sand and Myrrh, it was about a Bedouin and desert society and in the desert, in the desert, and they banned my books, but they are all in English.
They're allowed in
the
English.
Arabic, a friend of mine took a picture. She was in the Ma'rad al-Kitab in a book fair, and there was no books of mine in Arabic, but there were in English.
They don't understand it.
Yeah.
Chris, you have a question?
Yes.
Before,
She
I'd
was
like to answer the lady.
Okay, sorry.
Well, I had two incidents.
Oh.
They were well received. I can say this in the press, but the press is something, and the society is something else. The press, it's not necessarily that it reflects the society. So with Be as in Beirut, I remember someone told me there is one heroine who meets her old lover, but she's married, and she's on the process of getting separated from her husband and leaving to Australia because she doesn't want to stay in the war with her kids. And she meets her old lover and she sleeps with him. She makes love with him. And then this man from my society said, "Is it about you?"
Oh my God! He asked you this question?
Yes. Are you writing a biography? Because the Arab reader is in French, it's a voyeur. I don't know.
Yes, voyeur,
Is a voyeur.
Yeah.
The Arab reader, when he reads for a woman writer, he will never ever be able to differentiate between the text and the woman who wrote the text. So if she writes about a whore, this means it's about her.
Oh my God.
And always I face these things. And when I finished the Wild Mulberries, Amir, in Wild Mulberries, the auntie of the heroine, she wants to become a shaykha. Shaykha means a religious woman. But she wasn't accepted in the Druze religious society because it's a very narrow society that don't accept people whose relatives are married to other sects. And this Shaykha, her niece, is married to a Christian. So they never accepted her in the religious house and majlis. So she was very angry, and every day she put on the mandil and the black skirt, and looking at her in the mirror and said, "Why they don't accept me?" So I was criticized by a lawyer in the Druze society, a woman lawyer, imagine, a
woman
woman,
lawyer,
not a man.
yeah.
Yeah, a woman lawyer, and she sent an article to Al Hayat newspaper saying that I'm very rude and impolite. She used rudeness and impoliteness. And I'm sure if it was a man who wrote this novel, nobody will say that he is rude and impolite. Muhammad Shukri wrote a novel
Oh my God.
more than 20 years
Yes.
before my novel. And
Khubz al-Hafi.
and Khubz al-Hafi, and the whole novel was
Right.
sexual
Those
relations,
with,
orgies,
with,
and
yeah.
they celebrated his
Yes,
novel.
of course.
Everybody celebrated his novel. So even the woman writer suffers just because she's a woman. She might be accused.
That she is the
writing.
heroine,
Yeah.
the character, the main character,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
heroine.
How dare you speak about
Yeah.
these things?
Yeah.
They're also revealing the secrets of the community of the home.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because the Druze is
Yes,
very
especially,
like
yeah.
the
Yeah.
Ismaili, yeah,
Very
very
close
close.
sect, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Like one day, the As-Saqi book, they are publisher, but they have the bookstore.
Bookstore.
They called me laughing because a man came, someone sent him. He said, I want the book of Hanan Al Shaykh. They said, she has a few books, which one? He said, I would, the one who falls in love with another woman.
That's cute.
That's funny.
It's like the publisher that then takes a risk on the Arab woman writer.
No,
No.
listen, the publishers, they welcome good novels, and sometimes they take money if they don't want to publish this book, if you pay them, they accept to publish it. Yeah, sometimes, not all of them. I mean, some of the publishers, yeah.
The writer.
Yeah.
So one last question. Can I take Chris, please?
People want to hold on to this tradition and that tradition and another tradition and another tradition. And all of them seem to just create levels of division, and that your work suddenly lives within those divisions and that's what makes it interesting, is that you're kind of trying to square a circle. Is there going to be a point in time when people become more together, or you are all being held deliberately in your own little boxes where you're allowed to be this, but you're not allowed to be that?
I didn't get his question. Sorry, I didn't get your question.
Okay,
About
so
stereotypes.
Yeah, Amir, want to?
Yeah, maybe you can help us, Hamid.
You're talking about stereotyping, aren't you?
Oh, yes.
Or being boxed into one.
Yeah.
everyone's kind of given if they look at somebody, they're already automatically given a boundary in which they exist, and sometimes these boundaries don't overlap between one group, notion group of people and another notion group of people. And it feels as if what's good about writing from that point of view is that you can exploit those schisms and get into the minds of people and get them to look at those groups actually properly rather than just deciding who they are. How do you feel your writing is helping to develop the notion of people coming together?
You cannot imagine the importance of translation for us, because this text that has its own narrow specifications with respect to region, to religion, to geography, suddenly it becomes a text that belongs to the whole world. And I think translation is one of the tools to get along with people together. Like if you don't read me, how can my language as an Arab woman, Lebanese woman, how can it reach you? How can my voice reaches you? That's why always I say translation is the best way.
Thank you so much for Iman, Hanan, and thank you for being with us tonight.